Let me tell you, I didn't think we'd be talking about Halo getting a new engine and technically a new studio this week, but here we are. What's happening, guys? Welcome back to another video, and today we're talking about the major news for Halo that came out of the Halo World Championship last week, where right before the final series between Optic and Space Station in Seattle, 343 dropped some major news that really could be a game changer for the future of the entire franchise. And I want to emphasize that it could be a game changer. And I think that it is. So let's take it from the top. If you missed the news, there are really two big things to know here. Number one, 343 Industries is now Halo Studios. And before you type your angry comment about how a name change isn't going to fix 343 and it should be an entirely new team making Halo, it pretty much is. Pierre Hintz took on the role of head of 343 after Bonnie Ross left a couple of years ago for personal reasons, but that wasn't the only major shakeup. Pretty much the entire leadership team that worked on Infinite has left the company for one reason or another, and that includes some pretty major names like Infinite's creative director Frank O'Connor and Infinite's senior creative director and head of creative Joseph Staten, also known as the voice of the Grunt in some classic Halo games and Halo Infinite. I feel like that illustrates just how deep some of these changes cut. I mean, these aren't just a few extra administrative people that have gone on to bigger and better things. These are people that were foundational to Halo Infinite and to the 343 era of Halo itself, which is exactly why a new name makes sense, because this really feels like a new start for the company. But they have a lot to prove, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. Now, we can't talk about this generation of 343 Halo without talking about the development issues that have seeped out through the years. Jason Schreier did a big expose on the development of Halo Infinite, where he shared that one of Halo Infinite's biggest development problems was labor. A large chunk of 343 workers were on contracts and couldn't stay longer than 18 months due to Microsoft restrictions. Full-time promotions were rare, so the studio was constantly losing talent and knowledge. Needless to say, everyone you ask is going to have a different opinion on being a contractor at a major game studio, but an article from all the way back in 2013 from RC Peters, a contractor at Certain Affinity that worked on the quality assurance team for Halo 4's multiplayer, shares a pretty scathing look at what it was like being a contractor at Microsoft during that time. What he calls out isn't necessarily the grueling hours or the pay, but the promise of more opportunity without the follow-through. In Peters' article, he calls out putting in the work and a lot of extra time to really try to make a name for himself with leaders and land a full-time gig with the team, and that just never happened. And according to him and many others, it seems like that kind of thing never really happens. I bring this up because it shows how the industry is shifting and has shifted over the past 10 years. In the early Halo days, developers still had that early Doom feel to them, a group of people with a shared vision for a game, some money to make it happen, and the time and dedication to do it right. As games have gotten larger, so have the teams, and so have the companies that house those teams. And if contract work is the new norm, then the studio has to be changed to fit that model, which is exactly where big change number 2 comes in. Unreal Engine 5. All future Halo games are going to be built in Unreal Engine, and that's a very big change from Halo Infinite, which was built in the Slipspace engine that was based on Halo Reach, and it was meant to try to have that same kind of old school Halo look and feel, but it ended up just holding the developers back in a very, very big way. If the average contractor had an 18-month run at 343, let's just assume that the first 3 months is spent mostly learning how to work the Slipspace engine, and then from there, throughout your time as a developer, there are little quirks and issues from random lines of code that were carried over from something like Halo Reach that you've got to work through and figure out along the way. Sure, progress is made, but not as much progress as you could have made if the team was using industry standard tools, which Unreal Engine 5 is absolutely one of them. Unreal is used by some of the largest studios out there. I mean, even just looking at the last year, we've got Hellblade 2, The First Descendant, Tekken 8, The Final, Stalker 2 coming up. CD Projekt Red even made headlines when they finally announced they're ditching their engine and going all in on Unreal. Imagine if the developers of any of those big games could jump in, take what they've learned from those experiences, and almost immediately start getting in there and working on the next Halo game without having any kind of long onboarding or training on the engine itself. That could be a game changer not only for the speed of development, but also the overall final product of the game itself. Now, as always, I throw in the caveat that I am not a game developer, and if you are somebody that builds games, let me know down below, is this going to make building Halo better? But from the outside looking in, this seems like an outcome for the future of Halo that has way more potential than the future that we were looking at probably a couple of months ago. Ultimately, I keep coming back to that same thought that I shared in last week's video on Ubisoft, and I feel the same way about 343, or what is now Halo Studios. I want more, and I want better. Obviously, these giant modern AAA games are taking longer to make, so the expectation that we are going to get back to that same release cadence of old school Halo games is just unrealistic. Halo 1 came out in 2001, Halo 2 came out in 2004, Halo 3 came out in 2007, but those games were drastically simpler and smaller in scope than what people are expecting from games in 2024. But with Unreal Engine 5 being the new Halo tool of choice, that could open up a new world of possibilities. Imagine getting Halo Wars 3, a Halo Combat Evolved remake in Unreal Engine 5, a Halo 3 Anniversary Edition, Edition, all while we wait for the next big mainline Halo game. And I'm not saying that there has to be something every single year Call of Duty style, and I'm definitely not getting my hopes up that all of those projects are actually something that will exist. But that timeline is now more possible than it was 2 weeks ago when we were still talking about 343 using the Slipspace engine. And while I want more games, I also want better games. And I know this is a lot to ask, but stick with me. The thing that stood out to me the most about the big Halo Studios New Dawn rebrand video is that they're getting back to being an industry leader in graphics again, and Halo Combat Evolved was a showcase of what the original Xbox was capable of. It was blowing minds at the time, and I would even say that 343 kind of kept up that side of the expectation with Halo 4 and Halo 5. Those are very good looking games. But as much as I love Halo Infinite, and even though I've put literal weeks of my life into the game, there's no way you can look at it and say that it's a standout showcase of what the Xbox Series X is capable of. Maybe from a technological perspective, just with that open world Halo ring, but still, it's just not where it needs to be to have that wow factor. That being said, I've seen how good Halo Infinite can look on the highest end PCs on the market. Reflections are crisp, textures are detailed, the game can look great. But with Unreal Engine 5, it seems like those high-end graphics aren't as far out of reach for the common standard player. And obviously the footage that was shown off is just a tech demo created by the Halo Studios team for the sole purpose of getting a feel for what's possible. But if I boot up the next Halo game and it looks even remotely close to these shots, come on, that's the future of Halo that I'm looking for. So when it comes to the new studio name, the new leadership, the new engine, I ran across a comment on Reddit that I think sums up my thoughts in the situation pretty well. They say, I trust Pierre more than anybody in 343, Halo Studios. He's probably the only lead developer in the studio that has an actual proven track record of success, and now he's running the show. Pierre led the team that fixed the MCC and gave it the abundance of new content and features that we see today. Pierre did more with Halo Infinite in the 2 years he's been at the helm than the 6 years they took to develop Infinite under Bonnie Ross. Of course, they have their work cut out for them. They need to prove to us that this new direction can revitalize the franchise, but this is quite frankly the best opportunity they've had to do it since 343 took the reins from Bungie. I'm rooting for them, and I think we all should. Completely agree. Now, rooting for them is different than having blind faith that the next chance is going to be the one they really needed to stick the landing and make a Halo game that fans deserve, and quite frankly, that this franchise deserves. And while this video and the announcement overall has focused pretty heavily on the graphics and the process of developing a game, I also want to call out the graphics aren't everything. The story and the writing are a huge part of what drove the original Halo trilogy to fame. So if the team is really going back to the series' roots, they've also got to focus on delivering a great new story just as much as they've got to focus on delivering great graphics and gameplay. So to recap, what we've seen so far is a leadership change over the last couple of years, followed up by a new studio name and a new studio engine. And while these concept shots of Master Chief and the Arbiter and a Halo ring, and not to mention the flood footage, which all look fantastic, it's all just test footage. But it's good test footage. And it's the most promising new direction out of 343 that we've had in a while, and with that, I'm choosing to be optimistic and excited about the future of Halo, because if there's ever been a time to be excited about Halo in the last 3 years, it is right now. But that's just my 2 cents, and I'd love to know what you think down below. How we feel about the future of Halo right now under the newly named Halo Studios. Are you excited for what they're bringing, or are you taking a wait-and-see approach? Or maybe you got burned and you're not paying attention at all because Halo's been dead since Bungie left. No matter what you're feeling, I'd love to hear it in the comments. And of course, if you're new here, you like what you see and what you hear, hit that subscribe button for videos like this every week and gaming news shorts throughout the week to keep you in the loop. And I'll catch you on the next one.